fight alone will make us rich beyond our wildest dreams.
Even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is the Disenfranchised Podcast. That's right, we're that podcast all about those franchises of one, those films that fancy themselves full-fledged franchises before falling flat on their face after the first film. I'm your host, Stephen Foxworthy, and joining me, as always, the stalwart man, myth, and legend, that is Tucker. Hey, Tucker.
Hello, Stephen. How are you doing?
I am well, sir. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I've got this big old cup. I brought this cup for this very occasion because I don't like this movie very much. So
it says radiate positivity and then good vibes.
Good vibes, man.
And those are being held up by sloths? I
guess so. This is my roommates. I would never own anything like this.
I was going to say, it doesn't seem like you're kind of fair, honestly.
But I'm glad it's here for this evening because it helps me out. And also, it's a big coffee mug. So while I'm judging you guys for your opinions, you'll be able to tell because I'll be taking sips out of a big coffee mug. And big coffee mugs are the easiest drinking thing that you can convey judginess with. Check this out. Watch.
And of course, at that moment, his screen freezes, so I don't see the sip.
It was great.
I imagine it was. I have to imagine it was. But we are not alone, despite the fact that our good friend Brett Wright did run off into the woods a while ago and has not yet returned. We wish him a speedy return. But in his stead, formerly of the Cast of Cthulhu, good friend of the show, returning guest, back after National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1 and Little Monsters. Yeah. It's our good buddy, Jim Rohner. Jim, welcome back.
I remembered Loaded Weapon 1. I totally forgot that I was here for Little Monsters as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm having a bit of an existential crisis because I thought we were talking about George Clooney and Brad Pitt's Wolves, and I am woefully unprepared. So
Ooh.
I'm just gonna wing it. So I'm assuming there's some type of man who turns into a wolf in the movie we're discussing tonight.
I believe so. Let me check my notes here. It looks like tonight we are covering not 2024's Wolves, future episode of this podcast, by the way. Absolutely one we're going to cover.
Yep.
But instead, we are covering 2010's The Wolfman. Directed by Joe Johnston, the journeyman of Hollywood, Joe Johnston. Written by who's credit on this one? Andrew Kevin Walker and David Self, and starring Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, Emily Blunt, Hugo Weaving, Geraldine Chaplin, Art Malik, and if you watch the director's extended cut, Max von Sydow.
Yeah, dude. Mm-hmm. I didn't watch the director's cut.
Where is it available? Is it only on the Blu-ray or is it online somewhere? Okay.
Yeah.
Steven, you own this movie?
No.
Oh,
this was a borrow. This was a borrow. Although I will say, for the record, werewolves are my favorite movie monster. I love werewolves.
Okay, that's
fair.
And
so there is a part of me that went into this movie hoping for a secret masterpiece. There is a part of me that does kind of have an affection for some of the things in this movie because of the werewolfiness of them. But I am sorry to say this one's not a secret masterpiece. This one is not the secret masterpiece I was hoping for.
It's bad as hell, and not in a good way.
See, and I didn't think it was bad as hell. I just thought it was aggressively mediocre with little hints of greatness.
You know, when I finished this movie and I started watching the credits, and I was thinking to myself, what's one positive thing? What was one thing that I liked about this movie? I couldn't think of anything.
You thought the fact that it was over, that it's finite, that it only lasted an hour and 45 minutes?
So I did something I never do unless a movie's really, really bad. And I turned it off without watching the credits, you guys. I didn't watch the credits to this movie.
Sinner.
And that's so few films does that happen. I have to really hate it to be angry at the people who made it for making me look at it. I just turned it off. I couldn't believe it. I was I was a little shocked. I can't remember the last time I didn't watch the credits because I'm like, well, this movie sucked, but the grips and stuff, they deserve some credit. And the lighting guys and the best boy.
But not for this movie.
No, fuck all those guys.
Yikes!
For being a part of this movie.
Jim, you requested to come on to talk about this movie. What is it about this movie?
Okay, well, I'm of two minds, just based on Vincent's opinions.
That's Vincent.
Two roads diverged into Yellowwood.
Inside you, there are two wolves.
Part of me wants to take the path of really defending this movie to see how frequently and how deeply Vincent can sip from that deep cut over this episode. Can
I just be Vincent from now on? Can that just be me, Steven?
If you want to have another opportunity to ask who am I here, then by all means.
God, you're right. Yes, confuse me more. All right, I'm now officially Vincent for the purposes of this podcast.
Or I could take the actual path I was going to take, and which is much more in line with Steven's opinion of this is such a mediocre, forgettable movie that I would be surprised if anyone felt strongly one way or the other. Like, it doesn't deserve strong feelings. That which is not miles away necessarily, but which is far away from where I was in 2010 when I first saw this movie, thinking it was like, oh, this is actually pretty good and sort of underappreciated considering the circumstances, which was 3 weeks before principal photography, Mark Romanek dropped out and Joe Johnston had to take it over.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and you know what? If I may, just for a second, since you mentioned him and we might not mention him again, Mark Romanek is my favorite music video director.
Excellent. Yeah.
Of all time.
Mm-hmm.
All time.
And
he's the GOAT. I mean, people like Spike Jonze, I get it. People like Michel Gondry, I get it. But Mark Romanek, And so, I'm kind of glad he didn't direct this because I don't think it would have been better.
I think it would have been more interesting and better in some ways. And I mean, and I'll say, I understand your opinion between Johnny Cash's Hurt, Audio Slave's Cochise,
99 Problems,
and Weezer's Pink, or Weezer's El Scorcho. Those are untouchable in terms of music video quality. And I think what he would have brought to this was a little bit more of I don't even want to say directorial flair, but why don't we start at the beginning? And I don't know how you guys typically do things, so I'm going to hijack this.
Do it, please.
Please do.
Go.
At the very beginning, you have the sequence where we have our first victim who is killed by the werewolf. And what struck me about that opening sequence is how there's no atmosphere or build-up or tension to it. It's like a guy running through the woods. There's a couple shots. We see a werewolf. And he kills a guy, and then it's like, credits, here's our movie. But there's no atmosphere, no build up to it, no kind of like, there's not enough time to kind of feel like you're part of a world or like a vibe. It just kind of is. And all throughout this movie, everything just feels like it is. And Joe Johnston is a serviceable director. Captain America, the First Avenger, I really like.
The Rocketeer,
pretty
come
good.
on. Yeah.
But like, you just kind of get the sense, and once again, he came in 3 weeks before the film was going to be done, but you just kind of get the sense that he's just kind of shooting what's on the page as opposed to adding anything to it. So while I don't necessarily think, because this script is also not good, but what I think Romanek could have brought to it was a bit more of just kind of, and I hate to sound like Gen Alpha, but like vibes or a feeling, just like kind of getting the sense of like, I feel like I'm in a world. There's so many things that are in this movie that have no flair, no inspiration, no real kind of like, you get the sense this was done by a workman or a yeoman style director.
Right.
Because even like the sequence in the pub when we kind of are hearing the people talk about, the old guys around the table, and then you have that one old guy who's like, oh, let me tell you, it's actually the werewolf kind of thing. It's just like shot, reverse shot, reverse shot. This guy, master shot, bing. Like, we're out. Like, there's nothing. It's just kind of like, here's a character, here's a plot, here are characters, here's a setting, jazz hands. Like, it's
right.
It's painfully by the numbers. Painfully by the numbers.
It absolutely is. And so, no director can elevate a mediocre script, but I would have liked to see what Romanek could do to it. Because if there is any through line through his music videos, they're all shot fantastically. Like the way that he uses lighting, the way that he uses shadow, like he's a very talented director. And Joe Johnston, a serviceable director, but not one that you necessarily like see something like, oh, that's a Joe Johnston flick.
Exactly.
I think you have to give Joe Johnston something that's good, and like The Rocketeer, for example, and he can make it great. But if you give him something that's not great, and like you were saying, he came into it so late into the process that even if he could add some kind of flair to it, he has no time to sit with it and like decide what that's going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
So he was like, good or bad, Joe Johnston, he was fucked from the start, basically.
He is, and I said this in my Letterboxd review, he is a modern day Victor Fleming. He is the guy that you just kind of bring onto your pick, because the two best movies that Victor Fleming ever made, the two that he's best known for, are ones that he was brought in as a ringer halfway through production. It's The Wizard of Oz and it's Gone with the Wind. Those are the two that you know Victor Fleming from. But he's a journeyman. He's a studio guy. He would come in. He would do whatever the studio wanted to do. You need a firm hand. You need someone to slap Judy Garland. I'm your man. You need someone that can like cut Clark Gable so that he like behaves. I'm your guy. Like that was Fleming. That was what and Johnston strikes me as one of those just guys that you bring in a pinch to do the work. Like we talked about this a little bit on the Nutcracker in the Four Realms. He's brought in after the actual director, Lasse Hallström, is kind of ousted from that movie. He's brought in to basically back cleanup and just finish the job. Like he's the guy that you bring in if you want something done on time and under budget. Let's call Joe. He's going to make it happen. And every now and again, there's a real banger in his filmography, and then there are some that are just like let's go through it. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids in '89, The Rocketeer in '91. So he starts as kind of a Disney guy. He does the live action segments or sections of The Page Master in 1994.
Oh, word.
He does Jumanji in '95. Future episode of this podcast, Jumanji, because it turns out they actually had an idea for a sequel. There you go. 1999, he does a movie filmed in our very own hometown, Tucker of Indianapolis, Indiana, October Sky.
Oh, word. With
Jake Gyllenhaal and Laura Dern. In 2001, he directs the second best Jurassic Park movie, Jurassic Park 3.
Steven, it's not even April yet. What are you talking about, dude? Not even April, dude.
In 2004,
it's worth mentioning, you were saying like he's kind of the clutch guy. You bring him in, like we're like, we need somebody, we're ready to go, and like some shit happened, we get Joe Johnston. No, but what about Jurassic Park 3 though? He'd been trying to direct a Jurassic Park since the sequel, and I feel like Jurassic Park 3, unfortunately, is his baby.
And here's the thing. He's coming off of a string of movies where he's gone in, done the work, and regardless of how we feel about them, there have been some pretty good returns on those films. Dude. Like those films do well enough that is probably his blank check, as it were.
Okay.
And then we get...
Bless you again.
In 2004, we get Hidalgo.
That was animated, right?
No, you're thinking of Cimarron, the Spirit of the Stallion, or whatever.
I've never thought of that.
In a horse.
Like, I don't know what the fuck that is.
That's Viggo Mortensen in a horse. What's the big follow-up to Lord of the Rings.
The Scorsese one that's animated. Isn't there a Scorsese one that's animated? It's a kid's movie.
Are you thinking of Hugo?
Is that? I thought that's what we were talking about.
No, Hidalgo.
Wolfman. This is the
Same
Wolfman
thing.
episode.
Oh, the Wolfman. Wolf. Yeah, I was.
which is Joe Johnston's follow-up to Hidalgo.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
And then on the back of this movie, he gets Captain America: The First Avenger.
Really good. I really like that movie.
Yeah, he came in and did it like he
usually
does.
I was going to say that movie has more in common, I think, with probably his best film, The Rocketeer, than with anything else in his filmography. Which I think is why
that movie.
Right. It's why he's really able to kind of bring that home, is because up to this point, with a couple of exceptions, he's a period piece guy.
Yeah.
And then he does Not Safe for Work, and then comes in to basically back clean up on The Nutcracker and the Four Realms, and has not directed a movie since.
Well, that was what, 2018?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is Not Safe for Work?
Not Safe for Work, according to IMDb.
It came out around like 2013-ish.
An office worker is trapped inside a building where a killer is on the loose. Comes out 2014.
I want to see that.
Michael Gladys, Max Minghella, son of Anthony Minghella. And those are the only two people in this cast that I've heard of.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the only two people in the cast. And I was like, now I'm really intrigued.
I'm looking at the IMDb page for it, and I'm still not convinced this is a real movie.
Right?
It's an hour, 14 minutes long.
I mean, that counts. That's almost... That's 70 minutes. 70 minutes is
technically a feature. Right? Yeah, technically a feature.
All right.
They just made it with credits. They just made it.
Just under the wire there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, getting back to the Joe Johnston of it all. Yes. I feel like in my head, and I can't corroborate this because it's in my head. Wasn't at one point Joe Johnston kind of floated out there as like the next Spielberg or like a Spielbergian type of guy because of The Rocketeer?
That would not surprise me, because everybody at some point gets floated as like the next Spielberg. Anyone with like a couple of hits under their belt.
That's true.
But he got his start working on, he was an effects guy working on Star Wars. Yeah. So I mean, George. Exactly, which is probably how he gets plugged in with Disney in the first place to do Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, to do The Rocketeer. Which again was a very big deal for, some of us in our generation, but it's not really like a big colossal hit that spawned the franchise they were clearly hoping it would.
Right.
So,
and of course, if you don't have The Rocketeer, you don't have the seminal Sky Captain World of Tomorrow, which just set the world on fire.
Future episode of this podcast. Yes.
I'd love to revisit that because I hated it when I saw it. I bought it blind because I was like, this is for me.
On paper, it very much does seem like a Tucker movie, so I don't blame you.
You know what's funny? I'm just thinking about this. Anyone who has been dubbed as like the next Spielberg or kind of connected to that, like if Joe Johnston truly was one of those people, what ended up happening to him? They said that about J.J. Abrams. Look at what ended up happening to his filmmaking career. What's his face? Colin Trevorrow was handpicked by Spielberg to do Jurassic World. Look what happened to him. Like it's kind of like
M. Night Shyamalan, the same.
Right.
Toby Hooper.
Was that really a thing? Or
I don't know. Like, he didn't really do much after that. Like, so I don't know. He did like the Toolbox Murders, or was that Carpenter?
No, that was Hooper.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, he didn't really do
much.
Plus,
I think also Texas Chainsaw 2 was after Poltergeist, if I recall correctly.
I think you're right.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
because it was over a decade after. Yeah.
You remove that blaspheme from your mouth, good sir.
It is gone.
But yeah. So maybe you don't want to be dubbed the next Spielberg, I guess.
Well, and I think it's just kind of an easy thing to tack on to a young filmmaker who's coming out and kind of starting a career, particularly one who makes a movie that has kind of this certain perspective to it, that thing that Spielberg was doing very early in his career, a lot of, daddy issues, a lot of kind of wide-eyed magical innocence kind of stuff. Which all the people that you just mentioned kind of had in spades with their first films.
Yeah.
So, and Johnston with The Rocketeer he fits that kind of emotional vibe. So again, does not surprise me at all if that's something he was strapped with and like all the others failed to live up to.
Mm-hmm.
Because particularly in this day and age, there's never going to be another Spielberg because no one else is ever going to get the shots that Spielberg got.
Dude, yeah.
And no studio or whatever the semblance of studios are going to be in the next generation are going to want to take risks on someone who was like a Spielberg. I mean, can you imagine someone giving money to make Jaws, say, or like even like West Side Story, which was somewhat recently, and
Right.
a fucking fantastic movie, but also like, oh yeah, we'll give you money to remake one of the greatest American like musicals and films like that existed in history. Like, no one's gonna want to do that, because instead we're gonna get. I don't want to go down a tirade of studios and IPs and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about the Wolfman, right?
Speaking of IP, yes, we're talking about the Wolfman.
Sometimes, but wait. So from what I know from Spielberg, which is I've seen The Fabelmans, so that's what I know, is that he was kind of at the right place at the right time, and he's also really good at it. So it's talent and luck colliding like in the perfect storm. There's not another filmmaker that has hit exactly when they needed to fucking hit. Like Spielberg did.
I mean, that's every showbiz career, though. It's not just talent. The most talented actors in Hollywood are the ones waiting tables and like washing cars. Like, that's just the way it is. Luck has so much more to do with it than most people are willing to concede.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I mean, even a poker players, the lore behind it is like, I'd rather be lucky than good when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And to bring it back to the Wolfman, I think him and Joe Johnston were just pals, because every time I'm retold through YouTube videos or whatever the story of Jurassic Park 3, it makes it seem like they had been buddies like since the first one, because the story always is that Joe Johnston's bugging him to direct the next Jurassic Park movie.
Right.
And finally he gets to do the third one. So I think they were just buddies.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, again, they're connected. They've got the Lucas connection, so I'm sure. And all those guys kind of hung out and knew each other. Like, it's just stands to reason that that's one of those. All right, I'll do a favor for Joe kind of things.
Yeah. So. Yeah. For sure.
But I really want to dig into Tucker, who is not Vincent, and I apologize for calling you Vincent, but
that's
when you're
okay. I like getting
when
new
your
names.
handle is that's Vincent, what am I supposed to assume?
That's Vincent.
Well, you obviously haven't seen 2005's House of Wax. Obviously,
you're okay. You're good.
Come on.
But you are correct. I have not seen 2005.
That's too bad. You should look at it. It's fun.
It is a bit fun. I'm not going to lie.
I also like that you just phrase it as you should look at it instead of you should watch it. Like, no, I'll just kind of, put it on.
Yeah, have a glance at it,
Well, I mean, you are a father, so your role is going to be standing in the back of the room with your hand on your hips, just watching whatever's on TV. And not really watching, but just kind of looking at what's on TV. So, yeah.
Funnily enough, when my father was alive and he used to call the house asking to talk to my mom, he wouldn't say, "Let me talk to your mom." He'd say, "Let me talk at her." So connected to, which also gave you everything you need to know about how my dad communicated with people. But I'm really curious as to, because once again, Steven and I seem to be on the same page of like, this movie is so utterly forgettable to the extent of I watched this movie 2 days ago and I forgot that I watched it. Mm-hmm. So I want to know. Let's start with like one, because to ask why you hate something, but I guess like if you could point to just one thing straight, like the thing you feel strongly about, or the most strongly about, like where your hate is derived from, what is it?
Well, that's a difficult question, and I'll tell you why. It's because I hate everything about this movie, like pretty equally. Of course, there are things that stick out, like the terrible CGI, and not just the creature effects and the gore, but the trees. The first shot of this movie is through a CGI tree. The first shot is through a really shitty CGI tree, and that is not how you can't, if you're gonna have shitty CGI, build up some rapport with the audience first, so that when they see it, they're like, "Oh, that sucks," but I'm still into this. No, dude, you don't start with the shitty CGI shot.
I had a hope. I had a real hope because this movie starts on the moon and just starts pulling back, and the three branches kind of start to form a W in the middle of the moon. And I'm like, are we going to get the title of this movie spelled out in tree branches? Because I'm kind of into it. Yep. And then, no, we don't do that.
Just a shitty CGI tree. so rubbery, so just it's not even there, and it sucks. Another thing that really stood out was why the fuck is Benicio del Toro in this movie?
Okay.
Apparently a
Why?
big
Why is
fan
he in
of
this movie?
Wolfman.
I'm glad. I'm a big fan of a lot of things, but that doesn't mean I want to portray them on screen in a $200 million fucking movie.
But it makes
You know what
sense.
I mean?
It's one of those things that makes sense on paper because Del Toro is one of our swarthiest actors. And just to see him, like, it feels like a slam dunk. We got Benicio del Toro to play the Wolfman.
Well,
Like,
this could be. It could be a slam dunk, and the way you do that is you do a modernized remake. If you make this take place in New York City or Chicago, Benicio's your man. That is your modern day Larry Talbot.
so you want Benicio del
He's the
Toro
guy.
in Wolf, Mike Nichols' Wolf, is what you're asking.
No, because Jack Nicholson's so ridiculous, I don't want to replace him. I love that movie because it's as bad as this movie, but in the best possible ways.
I like that
Wolf
movie a lot.
Wolf is amazing. I love Wolf. I adore Mike Nichols'
Me
Wolf.
too. Oh, I love that movie so much. It's so stupid.
But no, it is weird though, because it's not just like we got Benicio del Toro. Like I believe it's producer Benicio del Toro because this is something he'd wanted to make for like a decade or something.
Right.
Very much a Nick Cage Ghost Rider sort of deal.
Yes.
For sure.
And I will. I won't say I will defend Benicio del Toro in this movie so much as I will say when it comes to playing a character who seems really beaten down by the world and the family legacy and the truth that he has stumbled upon, Benicio del Toro has a look and a demeanor which is like, yeah, this man is tired and beaten down. Like he just has the look about him, but it's also like, hey, you need to believe that this Latin or Latino actor is also the son of Anthony Hopkins, which like, I'm sorry, what?
No. Well, it wouldn't be the first. Do you remember Anthony Hopkins in Zorro? He just shows up in things where like a white guy doesn't belong. And he's just like, yeah, I'm straight up Spanish or Mexican. Either or. That's me. Anthony Hopkins, Spanish and or Mexican.
He's our generation Sean Connery. Like you look at Sean Connery in Highlander, where he's an Egyptian who is masquerading as a Spaniard with the biggest Scottish accent anyone's ever had.
Or a submarine commander.
Hunt for Red October, Russian submarine commander, who again, thickest Scottish accent anyone's ever had. Like,
and yet somehow does not take away from the greatness of that movie, like at all.
No, that movie is damn near perfect. Mm-hmm. Hunt for Red October is a fucking masterpiece. You heard it here first. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you heard it other places, because frankly, you should be hearing it more places.
Correct.
But like Anthony Hopkins is basically kind of assumed that role. He does Don Diego de la Vega in Zorro. He's playing this role here. Like he's one of those guys shorthand for gravitas. Like we need someone in here to just come in and just be authoritative for a few scenes. We call Tony. And he is, at least at this point in his career, probably slipped into his NAR period. Which is when he would take a script, and if he can like reads his scenes and he just writes NAR, which stands for no acting required, and he'll just and if he and he just comes in, he knows exactly what he has to do. Like Thor was one of those movies for him where he just shows up and he's just like, I know what this is. Like I don't have to act this.
Yeah.
He's also probably the best part of this movie. Like it really seems like he's either not caring, having a lot of fun, or is having a lot of fun because he doesn't care.
I think it's the latter. He's like, I can't believe how much they're paying me to do this, LOL. Right. And that's his entire performance.
Right. And
NAR.
And Dark Universe adjacent, a wonderful Van Helsing in Coppola's Dracula, I feel.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, and he's actually putting on an accent in that movie. He's giving very good accent in that movie. Take that, Sean Connery.
Speaking of Van Helsing, if you're going to do this color palette with shitty CGI, take lessons from Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman, not this movie. Because this movie's so dull looking.
It is.
It's so bland looking. There's no color anywhere, and when there is, it doesn't make sense. And if you want that kind of shit, that color palette, but for it to be exciting, just go watch Van Helsing.
Well, and I feel like every movie now is just so desaturated and so like void of anything that might make it visually interesting or arresting. Like even Wicked, a movie that is supposed to be like Technicolor brilliance, is just completely like sapped of its luster, which is a bummer. Like it's not this bad, but yeah.
There's no way this wasn't shot on digital. This wasn't shot on film. This is digital, right?
I have to imagine this is
It
digital.
has to be. Like everything like some movies it doesn't stand out. But in this movie it just looks so digital to the point to where like I don't know what's green screen and what isn't most of the time because it all looks so like smooth and unrealistically smooth and clean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, it was a negative format. It was 35 millimeter.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah. Now, I mean, there was a 2K digital intermediate process on it, but
that makes a lot of sense.
I also this was I wanted to put a pin in this and then get back to it when you were talking about the makeup effects and how bad they were. I believe what you mean is the Oscar-winning makeup effects by Rick Baker, which looked really bad. Which I will.
Rick Baker.
Shots fired here. I will kind of defend because I don't think the Wolfman makeup is great, but I think it does harken back a little bit to the simplicity of the older, like 1940s Wolfman makeup,
which is definitely what they were going for.
I completely agree with you, but. We've seen Rick Baker do werewolves.
Yes.
We've seen that. Mm-hmm. And it looked a lot better the other time he did it.
Like when he did it 3 decades earlier, yeah.
This would be like someone just graduated from Tom Savini's like makeup school and this is their first movie and they made this. You're like, "Oh, that's nice. That's pretty serviceable. That works a little bit kind of if you squint. Good job."
And I don't mind the effect of the makeup. Honestly, I really don't. I think
mouth thing. You know, I hate that.
You do hate the mouth thing. You really do hate the mouth thing. Whereas I don't as much. But yeah,
that's fair.
But I mean, yeah, I love the faithfulness because he's doing a different kind of. He's not doing a werewolf. He's doing a wolf man, which is at least in his mind and probably in some of the minds of some of the heads over at Universal, probably a very different thing. So he's sticking to the Jack Pierce model. He's trying to very much do whereas Landis with American Werewolf in London is doing something completely different and completely removed from what this is.
Yeah, there's kind of the camp of American Werewolf in London, The Howling, and Dog Soldiers, and then there's the Wolfman, both this one and the original one. And Steven, I like that distinction of like this isn't a werewolf, this is a Wolfman, which for some people might be a distinction without a difference. But like no, that actually is an approach to that. Anyway, that's it for me. Good night, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate having you here.
I think it's too bad that Joe Johnston either didn't have the time to figure out or just didn't really care about making the effects in this look good, because there's a way to blend practical effects and CGI to make something that's better than both of them. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's something they could have done. Can you imagine if they had taken the transformation scene from American Werewolf in London, which they kind of do, and use that as a practical blueprint, and they do as much of it practical as they can, and then enhance that with CGI? Can you imagine how much better that would have looked? So much better.
The David Fincher approach, if you will. Well, actually, no, not David Fincher anymore.
That's police.
Hope everyone's okay. There's a quote from Johnston in the Wikipedia from an interview he did with 30 Ninjas about the CGI.
Seems like too many ninjas to be talking to at the same time.
It's an obscene amount of ninjas, frankly. He said, I recognize that there were things I was going to be able to do from the beginning to the end, and things I had to rely on post-production for. I decided to basically just shoot Benicio in the sequence where he transforms and decide in post-production what I wanted the transformation to be. That was really my main reason for using CG. It gave me so much more flexibility, which if you're using CG as a crutch in that instance...
Yeah, that's not a great reason to like, oh, I don't know what it's going to look like, but we'll figure it out. So just do some stuff. Moving on.
I mean, a lot of that is the fact that he is, as we've said, that he joined 3 weeks before the movie.
That's fair.
Like started shooting. Like he just didn't have a lot of time to work with the effects people to really figure out what he wanted, and so he ended up relying on CG. And that's really the downside of bringing in a ringer and something like this on your big effects heavy blockbuster.
Indeed.
Yeah, because Tucker, you talk about how, what Mark. Okay, sorry, you're gonna have to edit out my cat from.
No, I'm keeping that in. That was intense.
Tucker loves kitties.
Because you talk about how what would have Mark Romanek have added to this versus not, and switching out a director with 3 weeks also raises the question of what crew does he then bring along, because the DP for this was Shelley Johnson, who was like a Joe Johnston like regular who shot a bunch of stuff with him. So like, who was Mark Romanek's DP going to be? Would it have looked different? Would we have not gotten that desaturated look? Would we have not, gotten X, Y, or Z? Because watching this I watched it on Peacock. I don't have a Blu-ray like fancy Steven does over there. But there are some shots where like you kind of, when it's blown up on a big screen, like you do kind of see the grain, which I really kind of appreciated because of it being a period piece. But at the same time, yes, it doesn't look like a good movie. And it's funny because that was one of the things that I remembered before I rewatched. I was like, oh, but I seem to remember like it really had a lot of cool ambiance with like candles and torches and stuff, and it had a good look to it. And then you watch it again, like, no, this doesn't have it's not like, there's not anything special or unique about this. There's kind of some shots or scenes here and there where it's like, oh, I get the sense of kind of the decrepitude of the manor that Talbot is coming back to. And like, you really get the sense of this family legacy, which is crumbling, but they don't dwell on that. They don't really kind of spend a lot of time on it. Instead, they kind of shift to this romance, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Nope.
Emily Blunt is here for what, 5.5 minutes roughly, and yet we're supposed to believe that they're in love, and she's the one who's supposed to end this curse or whatever.
Right. Not a lot of, you're not doing much to sell me on this romance here, and particularly for relationships that starts with I was engaged to your brother, to like a minute and a half later in the film they're like making out in the middle of the woods, and you're just like,
who is a cartoon character, by the way? I don't know if you noticed that his brother's a cartoon character. The shifts in tone, I don't know if they're intentional or not in this movie, but the scene at the gypsy camp and when his brother dies those are completely different movies. Those are cartoons.
Yeah,
both of those are like Chuck Jones animated cartoons.
It is because almost like when his brother gets like slashed by the wolf in the beginning, there's this look on his face like, what? He's like,
and then he dies. Yeah, like, okay, dude.
Yeah, Wolfman.
Deep, deep.
That's all, folks. Oh, that would have been a much better movie.
Indeed.
Oh, man.
That's it.
Go for the absurd.
Yeah,
the absurd
it's
cut.
funny.
That's what we'll call that.
It's funny that Emily Blunt's character, who I know has a name, but this film basically treats her as woman character.
Right. I think it's Gwen.
I think you might be right.
Romantic interest.
Yeah, her criteria for falling in love is just like, oh, you're a man who's alive. Okay, I'm in love with you.
You're the main character? Great.
You're the main character of this movie? Great. Because according to my contract here, we're supposed to be in love. Great. Let's have a love scene. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's just none of it is believable, and like the big bad is supposed to be, spoilers for a movie which is 15 years old and you're listening to a podcast about, but like the big bad is supposed to be his father, who is like the original Wolfman, who has like who the curse is being passed down on. But there's no tension built up even between them, in the sense of like, oh, I'm coming home to my asshole father who did X, Y, and Z when I was younger, and this is why I don't come home, and he's been such a shitheel my entire life. But I guess also, yes, killed my mother in like some weird repressed memories. Their showdown at the end doesn't feel like there's been a build up to it. It's just kind of like, okay, obligatory, like showdown at the end. But like,
it's another weird tonal shift, like it turns into a completely different movie. It's just too CGI. It's like a superhero fight. It's like you have to have one in every movie. And there's your Wolfman superhero fight at the end. Like it's so by the numbers, painfully by the numbers. Like I was saying before, like what are they going to do first? Okay, they're going to transform, then they're going to come to each other and jump and meet each other in the air. Exactly. Yes. Of course, that's what they're going to fucking do. Like what else are they going to do? Ugh, man, it's so annoying. And I think you helped me figure out why I can't let this go. Why I can't just be like, this is a forgettable movie and I don't like it, but whatever. It's because I've watched some really good movies in the last couple days. Specifically Shadow of the Vampire, which is superbly shot. That is a beautiful movie. I don't care what you think about any other part of the film, and a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, but that film is so uniquely, creatively, and beautifully shot. And to go from that last night to this, just shockingly bad. Shockingly boring and dull. This movie's so dull.
It is, and it really does kind of feel like if you have like a TV series, which we have this one episode which is taking place in like 1800s London, like it's going to look like this entire movie. Like it's kind of the shorthand of like, okay, here we are, London in the 1800s. Let's desaturate. Let's kind of put some candles everywhere, and we're going to have a lot of old bit. And even like and once again, with the caveat, this whole episode should have the caveat of like, Joe Johnston, 3 weeks. What could he have done?
Right.
We still love Joe Johnston. We love you, Joe Johnston. It's not your fault.
Correct.
No, it's not his fault. And but everything just looks like the only things which I really feel like are inspired or unique were a lot of things which were in place and already naturally going to be good, such as Anthony Hopkins, such as Hugo Weaving. Like, those are very good actors who like could, give them a wet paper bag and they're like, yeah, okay, I'll make something of this. It'll be fine. And mostly is. But, Emily Blunt, who wasn't really Emily Blunt yet at that time, a script who had 2 writers, so you have to imagine how many other people kind of had their hands in this, including from Universal.
At least 2 writers.
Yeah.
Well, and apparently David Self was brought in by Joe Johnston probably 3 weeks beforehand to completely rewrite everything.
Okay.
Which
is
tells me a lot, right?
It's always a good sign.
That feels very telling to me, is that Johnston brings on David Self for a rewrite.
Because what would a film written by Andrew Kevin Walker, directed by Mark Romanek, what would that have looked like? And I would be fascinated, because you had something similar with like It and Cary Joji Fukunaga, who is like, oh yeah, now we found out he's a groomer and a sexual predator, cool, but still a guy who before that was known as like a very talented director who was getting a property that was like, oh, we've known of this, we know this property, this has like some clout behind it, so what can this guy with a unique voice, like what can he bring to it? And so everyone's going to play the rules like, oh, creative differences. And, I think the most you can kind of get out of it is like they had budget disputes. So what did that mean in the sense of, because if it was Mark Romanek wanted more money and Universal didn't want to give it to him, that got shot to hell because they did reshoots. And, despite Joe Johnston's like reputation, this movie went over budget and over schedule, and they had to do a whole bunch of it. And it turned out all for naught because it ended up tanking anyway.
Right.
I have to imagine that if I'm going to theorize, my opinion would be that probably creative differences between the studio and Mark that guy, that I like.
Sure.
Yeah.
He does music videos. See, my problem is like, how they say if someone mispronounces a word, it's because they read it first before they heard it. My thing is the only reason I know about Mark Romanek is because I bought a DVD of all of his music videos.
Oh yeah, the director
And
select.
yeah, I have all 8 volumes of those. They're fantastic. I bought it like
Wonderful.
4 years before YouTube became a thing, and you're like, yeah, I gotta get those music videos. And then 4 years later, you're like, fuck, what have I done?
I
Though there's
have
some
the
commentaries and stuff. Yeah.
really okay because I have the 3-pack of Michel Gondry, Spike Jones, and Chris Cunningham that is out of print now. Like you cannot buy it anymore.
Yo,
So
yeah,
that
I
will be
have
my
those
son's
two.
inheritance.
Yo, and the Spike Jones one has some of his skateboard videos on it too, which I thought was pretty rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I have to imagine just based on the creative output of Mark Romanek, that it had to be creative differences because, like, you see what this movie ends up being, and it does look like the studio said, "This is what we want from this movie. Now go make it."
Yeah.
There's a quote on the Wikipedia from a 2013 interview that Mark Romanek did with Collider, where he says, when there's a certain amount of money involved, these things make studios and producers a little nervous. They don't necessarily understand it, or they feel that the balance will swing too far to something esoteric. And we could never come to an agreement on the right balance for that type of thing. Ultimately, It made it more sense for them to find a director that was going to fulfill their idea of the film that they wanted. That's a Joe Johnston for you. And we just sort of parted ways.
Yeah,
I would have.
I was right.
I would have loved for this movie to be more esoteric. I would have like show some introspection, like show some weirdness as opposed. Anyway, but this was 4 years before Dracula Untold. So do we know, was this one always going to be the beginning of the quote unquote dark universe, or was that something that they kind of threw together afterwards?
I don't think this had anything to do with that.
It doesn't.
Point.
The dark universe doesn't come into being until they don't even start talking dark universe until
we don't even have an Avengers at this point. Like, Marvel's 2 years into the MCU. I don't think anybody at this point is really scrambling to get their cinematic universe together.
Not until 2012 is when that starts. Yeah. So like 2013 is when they start talking to Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman of the Star Trek reboot fame, of trying to start something new. So that kind of starts a new era, but this is kind of this weird in-between era where Universal can't figure out what it wants to do with these properties.
Yeah.
So you get like our previous episode on 1979's Dracula with Frank Langella. And then 20 years later, you get the Stephen Sommers Mummy movies, which are big hits.
And very fun.
Yeah, and awesome. Like, so much fun. And then in 2004, you get Van Helsing, which is their attempt at kind of rebooting a different thing. And they, honestly, I pitched in that episode, one of our earliest episodes. Go back and listen to that one with our good friend Hope Lichtner, first time she was on the pod. But I mentioned that movie. They should have crossed that over. Like the end post-credit scene should have been Van Helsing meeting up with Rick and Evie in Egypt somewhere. And then they should have done a big crossover. That should have been the third Mummy movie, is Van Helsing 2. Should have been the third Mummy movie.
So, I want to agree with you, but I just think that the tone of those Mummy films, it's a little too, I mean, it's kind of parallel to Van Helsing, but they're
all Stephen Sommers movies. Like, it would have worked.
I understand, but the Mummy's so... How do you put those color palettes together? How do you put Hugh Jackman in that costume in the fucking desert, Steven? Answer me that.
Very carefully.
No. It's...
Oh, here's an idea. You shoot it like Soderbergh shot Traffic. Bada bing, bada boom. There we go.
Oh, there you go. Once again, Steven Soderbergh has the answer to all of our questions. And the movie that won Benicio his Oscar. There you go.
There we go.
Fuck yeah, dude.
And then, so we get Van Helsing. That's a swing and a miss. And then we get the third Mummy movie. For most people. I love that movie. Yeah. For Universal, it's a swing and a miss. Oh, there's a kitty.
So weird. We're talking about the Wolfman, and Van Helsing truly is its complete opposite. But they're kind of, man, they're so much alike, but Van Helsing is bad in the same ways, but like in a really entertaining way. And I love it. And there's so much heart in that movie too. It's not a good movie, but you can tell the people that are making it are having a great time. This movie's soulless. The Wolfman has nothing in it. Nobody gives a fuck about this movie. Maybe Benicio del Toro, but what are you even doing here, dude?
And I feel like I'm asking that question about most movies that Benicio del Toro does these days is like, Benicio, dude, what are you doing?
Yo,
Avengers Endgame, what are you doing?
French Dispatch, though.
You know how I feel about Wes Anderson.
I think he's the best part of that movie, and there's a lot of really good parts in that movie. Way of the Gun. Steven, have you still not seen Way of the Gun?
You know I haven't.
Will you please put that somewhere on the straight up schedule? We're getting JP Leck on for that one because he also loves that movie, and I need someone to validate my opinion. That one.
I mean, again, like we're into 2026, 2027 now.
It's fine. I'm in for the long haul. I'm not quitting this podcast until I talk about all the movies I want to on straight up. It's a long list, Steven.
So this movie comes 2 years after the Rob Cohen directed Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
With Jet Li.
With Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh. Academy Award winner Michelle Yeoh. And so like this movie comes behind those, and I think this is kind of the end of this kind of with the rise of the MCU and the failure of kind of their last two big attempts at this. I think they're like, let's completely hard pivot. We're obviously not going to do the Hugo Weaving Wolfman sequel that we set up at the end of this movie. That's not going to happen. So we're going to hard pivot to our own shared universe of things, which we've already talked about the Tom Cruise Mummy. We have yet to talk about Dracula Untold.
We don't need to.
Coming up.
But wait, could we?
These movies are like consistently disappointing at the box office.
What if we could, you're talking about crossing over with Van Helsing. This movie could cross over with Van Helsing because Hugo Weaving was the only person in this movie that knew how fucking stupid it is. Like, because he's hamming it up the entire time. And
he's having a blast.
His portrayal of that character would fit perfectly into the Van Helsing universe. Get him as like the good werewolf, because remember Van Helsing was a werewolf at one point. So maybe they could be pals, and they could solve supernatural crimes together.
Now, you know who I could see showing up in the desert is Hugo Weaving as his character in this movie.
That's the spinoff, crossover spinoff.
With one of the pith helmets and, those mutton chops. Absolutely.
Yes.
That would work.
I want to step back and talk about the Dark Universe for a little bit.
Sure.
Because this movie doesn't warrant too much conversation, as we've already established.
We're all good on tangents here. You're among friends.
I remember its announcement. I remember that like black and white press photo of like all of them together and kind of like, oh, Russell Crowe's going to be, was he Dr. Jekyll he was going to be?
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, yes.
Obviously we had Tom Cruise with Benicio del Toro. Did they, because it was a while back where I'm forgetting, did they pitch it as like, was this going to be, like, were they going to be an Avengers type team, or were they just all going to kind of like appear in each other's movies kind of a situation?
Unclear.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Stephen. I was just going to say, during the original run, like in the 40s and 50s of the Universal Monster films, they did do a bunch of crossovers. Like, honestly, the Universal Monsters are the perfect choice for a shared universe because they kind of invented it.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the thinking going into the Dark Universe as a whole, is that and their kind of means of setting that up is Prodigium, which is the organization run by Dr. Jekyll. And there's like this one scene in The Mummy where Tom Cruise is walking through this like room full of artifacts, and you get like all these little Easter eggs. Like it's one of those ride the pause button kind of scenes that nerds just,
a framed photo of Claude
over.
Rains.
Right. There's a hand of a creature from the Black Lagoon, like encased in formaldehyde.
Yeah.
It's all that shit. It's just all kind of in there. So the idea is that this organization is going to be the thing that kind of runs us through. And then at some point, question mark, question mark, question mark, they all get together and do like a big House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, Monster Mash kind of thing.
Frankenstein,
obviously,
man.
right. Obviously, we never got to that point, but what they had pitched, Bill Condon was finally going to get to do his fucking Bride of Frankenstein movie with Angelina Jolie and Javier Bardem. They wanted to do a Wolfman movie with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as the Wolfman.
Let's do it.
Fucking terrible. I hate it so much.
Do it. No, let's do it.
They were going to do an Invisible Man movie written by Ed Solomon, which maybe there's something there, starring Predator Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man. And I mean, they have literally the Wikipedia entry for the Dark Universe has a list of canceled projects: Frankenstein, Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Scarlett Johansson was in talks for that one. The Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, another Van Helsing movie, and a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie.
Wait. It wouldn't be connected to the other one, though, would it?
No.
No Hugh Jackman? Well, fuck that then.
They actually were wanting to try to get Channing Tatum in for that one.
Okay. I mean, whatever.
I think the Dark Universe would have been stupid, but I would say that NBC Universal, I think, could benefit from having a Kevin Feige type of character who's at least kind of like, hey, here's all of our monster movie stuff. Like, you go do what you want with this stuff. Like, that I think could be cool, especially because you have Peacock, where like they're like every other streaming service are releasing their own original programming where you can only find it there. So like, just let someone kind of be in charge of that thing, of that arm of it, not to make a Dark Universe, but to just like at least make interesting content from these characters that are iconic and like basically built and defined this studio when it started out.
They have and it's Jason Blum now.
Okay. Well, and
Jason Blum is doing that.
You could do that, and then if at some point down the line it makes sense to cross something over, fantastic. Because that's something that Marvel proved, is that you don't go into it betting on a shared universe. You just
that's putting
make
the cart before the horse.
You make the best bottle movies that you can, and if they do well enough and it makes sense, cross them over.
Right.
And that's I mean, you could do that, like with the Invisible Man, the one with the gal from Handmaid's Tale.
That was fantastic. By Jason Blum.
Yeah, and that same dude is doing that new Wolfman.
Yeah,
correct.
I'll bet it's going to be rad, probably.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of where the property is right now. Is they're basically kind of reconfiguring these concepts for a modern sensibility and a modern audience, and figuring out a way to make these characters that are at this point fairly passé into actual threats, make them actually scary again.
Got to modernize them, yeah.
Exactly.
Like
and I think the
Invisible Man.
Right. And I think the approaches that they're doing are really working, at least insofar as the Invisible Man. We're covering this movie because the Leigh Whannell Wolfman movie comes out this weekend. So I'm excited to see that. That's like, it's a January release. So, tempering my expectations, but still, I really liked The Invisible Man. That was the last movie I saw before, the end times in theaters. So, and I really enjoyed it. Like I went with my ex-wife and one of her work friends, and I was the only one that walked out going, that was good.
Yeah.
I was like, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun with that movie.
Speaking of the Universal Monsters and new films coming out, I don't think it's associated with Universal, but Netflix and Guillermo del Toro are doing that Frankenstein, dude. And I'll tell you what, I respect Guillermo del Toro as a filmmaker. I think he's fantastic, but also most of his movies just aren't for me. But this one, as soon as it drops, I'm gonna see that motherfucker.
I mean, he's already made the creature from the Black Lagoon movie, so.
Well,
This one could work because of Del Toro's approach to humanizing monsters,
Agreed.
which is why I actually think, and Steve and I talked about this a little bit just because of on Cast of Cthulhu, we did the table read for his At the Mountains of Madness script, but why I wouldn't think that Del Toro was a good match for Lovecraft stuff, because you don't want to humanize those monsters. Those monsters are supposed to drive you insane and bring about like existential terror within you. But Frankenstein's monster, I think he's probably the perfect fit for that. But also, Tucker, I understand what you're saying, because Del Toro will do many movies that I absolutely fucking love, and then in between he'll make these ones where it's like, what were you thinking? Like, why was Pacific Rim the movie you wanted to make?
Because he likes kaiju and mechs.
Like,
really,
good
that's
for
what it
him.
comes down to.
Good for him. And it made a
Sometimes
lot
you
of
want to
money,
see
so
giant
that's
robot
great.
punch giant monster. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he does. There is that humanistic element that he brings, and I dig Del Toro. I even dig the movies that a lot of people don't like. Like, I really enjoyed Crimson Peak.
I did too.
I'm that guy.
Did not
So-
like
What
it
was
upon it. But
Not Kronos, but what was the mainstream horror film he did in the 90s? Was it Mimic?
Mimic, which Weinstein destroyed.
That was,
Correct.
But still, like, even with Harvey Scissorhands coming at it, I remember seeing that in theaters when it came out, and that's still a really fun and suspenseful movie.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
That's the movie that almost made James Cameron beat the shit out of Harvey Weinstein at the Oscars.
He should have done it. Like, I'm kind of mad.
I agree. After Cameron wins for Titanic, literally right after, Harvey Weinstein is there going, "Oh, you should come work for Miramax. We're a good friend of the artist." He's like, "Yeah, I heard you were what a good friend you were to my buddy Guillermo del Toro," and about socked him in the jaw. Like, there were like people like pulling him apart. It was I wish to be a fly on the wall for that moment.
Go get him, Jimmy. Go get him, Jimmy Cameron.
That's why we love you, Jimmy.
Paul Sorvino threatened to do bad things to Harvey Weinstein because
he could have.
Yes, I fully believe it would have happened.
He says, nodding slowly while placing a finger to the side of his nose.
Yeah.
Like, he could have. God, Paul Sorvino, what a fucking legend.
But no, I am very excited for Del Toro's Frankenstein, and
me too.
He is a guy where like his, like, even The Shape of Water is very good. I would probably never watch that movie again, but it was very good. But whereas his Pinocchio, I'm like, everyone should see his Pinocchio. It was incredible. But I have this thought every now and again, because I'm a strange person, but if the infinite universes theory is correct, which is the idea that if the universe is indeed infinite, then every iteration of our existence probably exists because of, in a world of infinite possibilities, and even the smallest percentage chance of thing happening will happen. So if it is correct, then there is a world out there which looks a lot like this one, where we're having a conversation talking about the Wolfman. But in that world, these things happened. Weezer's Pinkerton was a smash hit. Nirvana's In Utero tanked. David Lynch was allowed to make Twin Peaks for as long as he wanted to. And the Dark Universe came to be and was financially successful. There is a world where all that stuff has happened, and I am fascinated as to what that world looks like.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Especially you mentioned the David Lynch Twin Peaks of it all, and my heart kind of started to break a little bit. I'm like, oh, I want that.
No.
Here's the thing. I don't know that David Lynch would have wanted to make it too much longer than he did. So,
well, that's true. But at least it would have been a series in which the studio did not force him to reveal Loris Palmer's killer.
Right.
So season 2 turned out the way that he wanted to. Then there was a season 3 and that kind of stuff. Having said that, The Return is an amazing end to all that.
Right. And if we get David Lynch working on Twin Peaks as long as he wants, we don't get The Return, and that we also don't get Fire Walk with Me, the movie. So
that's a good point. But we maybe do get the trilogy of movies that he intended to make when, with Firewalk with Me being the first
Right.
one.
Again, future episode of this podcast, Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me.
I'm inviting myself on for that one.
Okay.
If for nothing else, is because the day that Cooper comes into Twin Peaks is February 24th, which is my birthday. And so I have hosted movie parties about Twin Peaks because it happens on my birthday. I'm like, and also it is a movie that I do not understand, and yet I respond to in so many ways because of Lynch's talent as a filmmaker, specifically to the way that he works with sound. And also, I'm going back through Twin Peaks now because of the Blank Check podcast. I don't know if you are a fan or your listeners are a fan.
Huge fan, yes.
I've gone through David Lynch's filmography, and I am remembering now how, and we can get more into this if we talk about that show later on, but like the way that he shoots liminal spaces is so unsettling and terrifying.
Absolutely.
Just that shot of in Laura Palmer's house with the camera pointing up at the stairwell with the fan going, there's something that is so upsetting about, like, I don't want to spend time in that space specifically.
It's menacing while being innocuous.
Yes.
And that is what is so amazing about him as a filmmaker. Like I have told so many people the most terrifying scene in any movie I've ever seen is the scene behind the dumpster.
Oh yeah.
In Mulholland Drive.
Like, yep.
Fucking terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, the Wolfman is not very good.
No, it's not. I wish it were. Because of my love for werewolves, because of my love of this property, like I own the Universal Legacy Collection DVD box set of the Wolfman films. Like I love these things. I love the Lon Chaney Jr. performance as that original character. I think he's the only person to play the same character throughout that entire franchise. Because Lugosi is there and gone. Karloff is there and gone.
Lugosi and Karloff just like switch back and forth all the time. They just like replace each other constantly. Like if one's not there, like you'll get Lugosi as Frankenstein's monster. What the fuck?
Yeah, in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. Yeah, he's. Yeah. But again, if you watch the previous Frankenstein movies, that makes sense in universe. Like why Karloff? Because he actually like has his brain, like the character of Igor that he plays in those films gets placed inside the mind of the Frankenstein monster. Like it all makes sense if you're paying attention, but unfortunately Universal did not do a very good job.
I'm sure the continuity is airtight.
Airtight.
Hey, no, Claude Rains plays like several different characters in that universe, right? Because he's in Wolfman, and he's the Invisible Man.
Yes, he
is. Anything else? I feel like he pops up in one of the crossover movies as somebody completely different.
I know. Here's what I do know is that the only actor to play all four of the classic Universal monsters, which is to say Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, is Lon Chaney Jr.
There you go. That tracks, yeah.
He plays all four of them at some point or another.
The man of 1,000 faces.
The son of the man of 1,000 faces.
The man of the son of 1,000 faces.
Because he's the son of the guy who was the original Phantom, the original Hunchback. Yeah,
that's true.
So that's his kid, chip off the old block, and that's why they wanted him. He didn't want to do it. They wanted the name of the Lon Chaney Jr. name. He was actually credited under a different name for the longest time. And they're like, no, you're Lon Chaney Jr. Damn it.
Well, and he's actually perfect for this role because even though he can disguise himself as anyone else, I think his look and the way that he portrays Larry Talbot in that original Wolfman movie. Like, he looks just like a dude. Like, Lon Chaney Jr. just looks like a dude.
He's an everyman.
He's got, like, a clear palette, a clean palette. He can make anything out of that, like, regular dude face.
And that hangdog kind of expression, and yeah.
Yes. The Wolfman movie.
Well, and like, that movie, the way that it does the transition.
Sorry,
They
I think
shot.
there was a
No, yeah. They shot the transition scenes for those original ones over like a period of like an hour, because they would literally just like have him lay there, and then they would apply some of the makeup, and then have him lay back down. They take another long picture, get him back up, apply more makeup, and the way that it was edited together made it seem like a seamless transition. That was kind of the magic of filmmaking, and we've been chasing that dragon ever since. And I think, again, for all the ills the man has brought upon the world, no one has really done that transition better than John Landis since.
That's true. John Landis, despite what you may think about him, is a very talented filmmaker, I think, in a lot of respects.
He's got a few good movies. Unfortunately, he led to a number of people losing their lives needlessly.
A little careless. A little bit of a careless fella.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say.
Then the world got back to him, or got back at him by giving him Max Landis.
Right.
Oh,
there you go.
What did Deborah Nadoolman do to deserve all that? That's what I want to know.
There is a horror anthology out there called Tales of Halloween. I don't know if anyone has seen it. I think it was available on Netflix. And it's basically, it's like, I think something like 8 or 10 like really short films that all take place on Halloween night. And they do have some actual like talented people, like Neil Marshall directs one of them. I think Darren Lynn Bousman does one. Nice. And John Landis is in one as an actor, with the plot, I think, has to be based on real life that he, or some type of like realism that he would never actually admit to. Because the plot is, he is this millionaire who 2 thieves like kidnap his son with the idea of like, we're going to hold him for ransom and this guy's going to pay us back. But his son is a literal monster, so they kidnap him and they call him like, we're holding your son for ransom. He's like, well, good luck with that, and like does not want his son back. And I think it has to be based in some type of like actual biographical facts, because it just seems too perfect.
Yeah, no, that seems accurate. That seems right. I like that. I like that for him, frankly.
You know, you mentioned that, and it makes me think how not very often, but just often enough to be strange, that John Landis shows up as an actor in things that you don't expect him in. Like Psycho 4. He's just a co-star of Psycho 4. He's just in it as one of the side characters. Through the entire film, he's there.
Yep. Just
there. And he's directed it? Nope. Produced it? Nope. Had a hand in writing? Nah. You're just like, hey, John Landis, what are you doing? Nothing. And then he's in your movie. No big deal.
Well, and again, he is one of those filmmakers who is enough of an influence on enough of a certain generation of filmmakers that they're like, I'll throw him in my movie. What the hell? Because again, God knows he's not doing anything these days. So, nor should he be. But yeah, like, and every now and again, you'll see stuff like that happen. I think enough people are kind of distancing themselves from him at this point. But yeah, at one point, all of those guys were in each other's movies. Like Spielberg has cameos in Blues Brothers and Gremlins. Like Spielberg just like showed up on set and did a role. Like Spielberg has acted in stuff before. Like it's just one of those, that's just something that those guys would do that almost never happens anymore.
And Spielberg is one of 2 directors where whenever I see them, it's so distracting. And the other one is Michael Bay. When Michael Bay shows up in shit, I'm like, holy shit, that's Michael Bay. And that's the only thing I can think about until he's gone. Mystery Men? All I'm thinking about is Michael Bay. Like, yes. Bad Boys 3 and the first Bad Boys. All I'm looking at, oh, look at that. It's Michael Bay. What just happened? I don't know. I was staring at Michael Bay. You know?
The first guy to do that was Hitchcock, and I kind of wish Hitchcock had made cameos in other people's films too.
Well, most of the time he's just kind of in the background. He's not like an M. Night Shyamalan where he's like, I'm going to give myself an extended cameo in this film.
Well, it got to a point where Shyamalan was like making his cameos like actual roles in the film. It's one of those like
most of them,
I'm directing, but what I really want to do is act. And so I'm going to put myself in a small role here, slightly bigger role here, slightly bigger role here. My character is the savior of the world.
You know who's good at that, though? As much as I've outgrown most of his films, I think Quentin Tarantino is really good at finding the perfect little director cameos in his movies, because he's just an annoying person in general. I don't think I could stand to sit with that man for like more than 30 seconds. Because when I hear interviews with him and stuff, I'm just, oh my God, shut up.
The thing you gotta realize,
he's a fantastic
though,
filmmaker.
He really is a guy that has not mellowed with time, in the sense of like he
No,
seems
and
like
he never
he's
will.
just as insufferable these days as he was when he was
But
in his 20s.
he's also self-aware, because he knows how much of that is going to work in his movie.
Mhm.
Like, I think
That's
the
fair.
most screen time that he gets is probably Death Proof. And because it's such kind of a background character, it works. It works.
It's when he's in other people's movies that it becomes really like distracting and like and bad.
Actually, I think in From Dusk Till Dawn, like, I hate him in that movie, and that's because he's playing the role so well. I fucking hate him.
Seek out a movie called Sukiyaki Western Django, in which Quentin Tarantino shows up with the
I'll bet he does.
most baffling accent, like even worse than his Australian accent in Django Unchained, where you're like,
No.
what
Oh dear.
are you doing here?
No.
I can't even describe it. Like, movie itself pretty decent, and then like Tarantino sticks out like, I can't even say a sore thumb, like a sore arm. He just sticks out with how bad he is in this movie.
Ouch.
It's absurd. No, and I love him as a filmmaker. I love like what he brings to even just like the art. Like, he bought a movie theater in LA. He's like, I'm just gonna like, I'm gonna curate
The
stuff.
New
I'm gonna show you
Beverly.
my prints. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's amazing. And I wish that there would be like a person who would do that in New York City, but there as of yet is not that kind of individual. But
Come on,
like,
Marty.
he's,
I know he's got his own stuff going on.
he does, and he's, and I don't think as rich as he is, I don't think he has Tarantino money.
Probably not.
But I'll also but then I'll seek out like I like, oh, when I heard that he had that podcast with Roger Avery, I'm like, oh my God, this just seems great. And then I'll download an episode. It's like, you are talking about movies that I've never heard of, and I cannot stand listening to you in particular talk about them.
Yeah.
Oh wait, Roger Avery though? Is Quentin Tarantino always on it?
Oh yeah, it's the two of them. It's the two of them all the time.
Fuck.
It's like the film archive.
It's their show, yeah.
I really want to hear what Roger Avery has to say.
Good
But
luck.
I don't know if I could sit through it if I have to hear Quentin Tarantino talk for more than like a minute and a half. It's about when I tap out.
Well, like I say, good luck.
Yeah. What? How about Tarantino talking for 2 hours? How about that, huh? There's a prospect.
No, that's what I
just
call
get
podcasting.
Can I get just the Roger Avery isolated, and then just, I hate that I'm saying this, but the TikTok AI voice just reading the transcript of what Quentin Tarantino says? Taking out all of the ums and you knows and you know what I means out of there. And then, because Roger Avery's my guy. Like, Rules of Attraction, come on, you guys. Killing
I want to
Zoe,
hear Roger
come on.
Avery talk about Silent Hill.
Please, yes.
There you go.
Anyway,
The Wolfman is not a good movie.
It's not a good movie.
I like it. There are things about it I defend. I defend the casting of Del Toro. Yes. Yes. Damn you. I do not like his Shakespeare at the beginning. Like, he's doing Hamlet and he's supposed to be like this great performer, and I'm like, is that what we're calling acting in this movie?
Yeah.
Have we not mentioned that he is British, but just because he spent a little bit of time in the United States, now he has a complete American accent with no hints of a British one. None. And Anthony Hopkins can't decide if he's doing a British or a Scottish accent in this movie half of the time. It's very distracting at certain points, because sometimes I think he forgets and thinks he's Scottish. It's really weird. The way he trills his R's on some of those words, it doesn't make sense for the accent he's doing for most of the film. Anyway.
The the film ends with a quote from Emily Blunt, which is the gist of it is basically, how can we decipher between man and beast? And
Mhm.
the movie fails so spectacularly at carrying that thread and that theme.
Right.
And and once again, was that changed when David Self like came in and did some stuff? Was it in Romanek's original? But there is that's an interesting thought, an interesting idea, which I if you approach a film from that perspective, or Wolfman film from that perspective, it becomes an interesting idea. Because like you even have like there's that scene, the one sequence which I really like because of how it's shot and just kind of how barbaric is when they're dunking Del Toro in like the ice water in the asylum.
Hmm.
Like really barbaric and really kind of horrifying. And like, okay, you kind of see there that idea of um how man can treat another man and how beastly that is. But that's basically it. Because for the rest of the time, we're just here like, yeah, he's a man who turns into a wolf. So like,
Right.
it. Um, and especially in a movie when like the concept of gypsies is now these days so insensitive and so like horrible, but there's no meditation even on that in the movie. It's just like, oh yeah, they're gypsies, and the film wants us to believe that they are less than human because of how their camp is just raided, and but it's there is as we've kind of said like over and over again, this like it's paint by number. There's nothing that is delved into too deeply. There is nothing that is kind of expounded on. It's just kind of like, yes, here it is, do with it what you will. And what
Right.
we did with it is summarily rejected it at the box office and in culture, basically. And
Right.
yeah, the state of the legend of these universal monsters, like I don't want Leigh Whannell to be the one to individually bring them back to life, but yet for a long time it was just kind of like they were stale and on the shelf, and we didn't want anything to do with them. And so Invisible Man was great. I am curious about what this new Wolfman will be like, especially because it looks like it's got a good cast. It looks like
Hmm.
it's kind of like just a literal cabin in the woods kind of a thing with like a minimal kind of like scope and perspective, which seems really cool. But
Right.
yeah, these were like I have similar to you, like Steven, I have like the Universal Classic Monsters like Blu-ray like set on my DVD shelf, and something I'll never get rid of. These were like I don't know, these were literally iconic. We overuse the term iconic and literally these days, but they were literally iconic. And these days, does anyone care about them? And the only ones that we have to blame for that is Universal, the studio that created them and gave them to this world.
Right.
Well, they're the foundations of modern cinema, for crying in the mud. Those original
Yeah.
Universal monster films, you don't have the horror you have today without that shit. Even something that's not even remotely related to that. The fact that those movies exist are the reason we have horror. Like you have stuff like Nosferatu and Caligari and shit like that before, but these were the movies that really brought horror into the mainstream
Mm.
and made it a genre that was profitable. So the studios were like, "Hey, we can make some money off this shit and it's cheap."
They saved Universal from bankruptcy.
Yeah, dude, yeah.
Like Carl Laemmle with his silly monster movies basically saved Universal. The fact that Universal continues to exist is thanks to this IP in particular. And the fact that they have never seemed to be able since the 1950s really know what to do with it is kind of a black mark that no one since Laemmle has really known what to do with these characters and with this property is it's a big oof because again, like you said, Jim, they are icons, truly iconic.
Well, I think it works against them that they are such a foundation, like I said before, because when you lay the groundwork, much like we were just talking about Quentin Tarantino. When Quentin Tarantino came out with
Mhm.
Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, he laid the groundwork for a completely new kind of genre. And then
Right.
everybody was making that film. People were expanding upon it, improving upon it. It's the same with the Universal monsters and horror. Like, they started this gangsta shit, and this is the motherfucking thanks they get? Because, like, you can't recapture that lightning in a bottle.
No.
Like, you're the foundation. People have improved upon that idea. People have expanded upon that idea. People have done so many things with it that if you're trying to just do what you did before, which is what this movie is essentially trying to do, the 2010 Wolfman,
Right.
Yeah.
it's not
Very
going to work.
straight up
You have to do
remake.
something different with it. You have to take that original concept, you have to find the heart of it, and present it in a way that modern audiences will be like, oh, this is something new and different.
And I think you just struck the nail on the head there, Tucker, is that all these other attempts have really not done what they can to find the heart of the thing. And it pains me to say this, even the Stephen Sommers Mummy films they don't find the heart of what those original Universal Mummy films were, because it's a very different kind of film. Stephen Sommers says, what if we just make an Indiana Jones monster movie?
I was going to say, yeah, it's
And
action
that
adventure,
was
Indiana
fun.
Jones. Yeah.
But it's not a Universal monster movie.
No.
Like, there's something because Universal, they're the ones, with Frankenstein in particular, that really start to humanize these monsters. And you have, like, the Mummy is this horrible monster, but what does he really want? He's lovelorn. Like, that's the whole thing of it's the Mummy's whole thing. The Wolfman is this man struggling with his own inner demons, played by a man literally struggling with his own inner demons. Like, there's a humanity to these monsters that even this movie, like, desperately putting the premise out there that this is what it's about, ultimately fails to achieve that humanity because of how poorly it's written, frankly.
Yeah, and it seems like, again, not to say that Leigh Whannell is going to be the one to save us all, but as Tucker was alluding to or desiring for, was like the idea of, okay, with the Invisible Man, and it seems like with Wolfman, is like, okay, we're going to take this story and we're going to update it. We're not going to build upon what came before. We're going to make this story as though the Invisible Man was created in 2020 when it came out. Like, this is the story. Right. And if you're into that lore, like, then you can appreciate, oh, cool, it's so great to kind of see how it started and how it's going to, just to bring in the internet meme. But then also, if you're a 17-year-old or like 18-year-old kind of person who's really getting into cinema and doesn't have that concept of what it was, then you're like, this is a really cool movie. Like, and it speaks to things which are relevant to these days, of toxic masculinity, of that idea of not believing victims and that kind of thing. And that's very smart. And I hope that we get to see that, which is not to say that I need to see a Mummy or I need to see a Creature of the Black Lagoon, but these are approaches that have worked. And so maybe there's some hope after all, who knows?
Yeah. We continue to live in hope, really, is what it comes down to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that having been said, I do feel like this is a good time to mention that The Wolfman came out in February of, 2010, February 12th, 2010.
Valentine's Day. Bummer.
Yeah. It opened number 2 behind a movie called Valentine's Day. I think that was the Gary Marshall, one of those like Gary Marshall huge ensemble movies centered around holidays.
I believe so.
A weird franchise unto itself, honestly. Like the holiday anthology movie franchise, wild. Anyway, Valentine's Day opens to 56.3 million. Wolfman opens to 31.5. Also new this week, opening at number 3, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief, one of the just most god-awfully long titles ever. And then at number 4, you get, in its 9th week, Avatar, down from number 2 the week before, just riding those Na'vi vibes, riding that Turuk, or whatever the name, Turuk Makto, whatever the name of that big bird thing was.
None of it matters.
Who cares?
Anyone? No? Okay, moving on. And number 5, something called Dear John.
Channing Tatum movie, I believe.
If I may
probably
make an aside here, that proves my point perfectly. what's going on with these Avatar movies? Number one, how do they keep getting made, and how do they keep breaking box office records? Because I don't know anybody who gives a fuck about Avatar. I don't know one person that gives a shit about Avatar. Who's seeing these movies?
A
Who's
lot of
seeing
people
Avatar?
apparently. Jim seeing them.
I mean,
Okay.
the most recent one, The Way of Water, hit special for me because I saw it shortly. When did the last one come out? Was it 2021 or 2022?
I think it
I
was
want to say
23.
no. I was still
No.
living in Indianapolis when that one
Are
came
you
out. So it
sure?
would have been 21 or 22. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
I
So
think
it,
I want to say
22.
22.
22. I'm looking at it. 22.
and it was a late year release, right? Because I remember I
Yeah.
saw it. Yeah. That one, and it hit a bit differently for me because my son had just been born, and there are some family things in there that I will say without having to spoil that movie. But they are, yes, they seem to have no real, and this is an ongoing discussion that we will not get into here, but this idea of does it actually have any cultural cachet because it makes all this money, and yet it seems to have no influence on any any other property, any audience, any filmmaker, anything, and just seems to be, as Scorsese has said, like content basically. Though at the peak of its technical capabilities, because it is marvelous. Especially the second one with underwater sequences in 3D is quite a spectacle, but it kind of is that, a spectacle. Um, Unrelated, Dear John, yes, brings in two names we've talked about on this podcast already: Channing Tatum, as directed by Lasse Hallström. So
There it is.
Oh, word.
Yeah. So there we go. Tying it all back in on itself. Rounding
It's
out
my
the top
fault. I
10.
apologize, you guys. It's
It
just
always is.
I don't get the Avatar thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steven.
It's okay. Rounding out the top 10, we have Dwayne The Rock Johnson in The Tooth Fairy, a movie we sadly cannot cover because Larry the Cable Guy made a sequel. Number 7 from Paris with Love, exactly. Number 8, Edge of Darkness. Number 9, Crazy Heart, the film that finally won Jeff Bridges his Oscar. And number 10, When in Rome.
what is that movie?
Okay.
When in Rome, is that the Kristen Bell? Yes, it's the Kristen Bell, Josh
Is it a
Duhamel
remake of Roman
rom-com.
Holiday?
Oh, sure.
Maybe. Dak Shepard has an uncategorized role in that film,
Sure.
which honestly is pretty much what every Dak Shepard role should be.
Agreed.
It opens, as we said before, to Wolfman opens to 31.5 million in its opening weekend. Ultimately ends up grossing 62.2 million domestic.
I mean, that's not a bad
another
opening, honestly, but if you can't maintain it, you're fucked.
Exactly.
You're fucked.
And word of mouth got out fast on that one. It did make 80.4 million internationally. So worldwide, it does get 142.6 million on a $150 million budget.
Yikes.
That's
I can't believe this movie cost that much.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that's the reshoots. That's the, bringing in a director last minute and all the problems and headaches and the rewrites and all that shit. That's all of that kind of just on display, unfortunately. So yeah, there you go. The tomatometer score on this one is a 32%. Critics' consensus, suitably grand and special effects laden. The Wolfman suffers from a suspense-deficient script and a surprising lack of genuine chills.
Yep.
The Metascore is a 43 based on mixed or average reviews from 36 critics. And Tucker, would you care to take a stab at the Letterboxd ranking?
Oh, gosh. So I've noticed, based on places that I've looked around on the internet about this movie, that it's gotten some reappraisal, some positive reappraisal as of recent. And I don't know what the fuck is wrong with those people. So I'm not sure, because Letterboxd is for the kids. It's memes for the kids. So
Sure.
I have to say 2.7 to 3.1.
You nailed it right out of the gate, 2.7.
That's
Can I
actually a
also
lot
say-
more fair than I expected from Letterboxd.
I'm not a fan of how there seems to be critical reappraisals for everything, because The Phantom Menace is starting to get a critical reappraisal, and that movie is very not good, and I would like to keep it.
I will say
Well,
this: it is still the best of the prequels.
I think a lot of that is because people that were kids when that came out
Yeah.
are starting to become old enough to be targeted for nostalgia.
Yes.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, for better or for worse, that's their Star Wars trilogy. Like, it's not their
Yeah.
fault. It's
No,
not their
that's true.
fault. But I think that's what that is. And I think with this movie, it's been 15 years, so like, I was ready to reappraise it. Like, I
Same.
wanted this to be good because I saw this when it came out, and I remember
too.
just not giving a fuck, just being so indifferent to this movie. It's so aggressively mediocre to the point that it's one of the worst films I've ever seen. But I was hoping that maybe 15 years would have been kind to it, but no, it's just as bad. It has not gotten any better in 15 years. It's still awful.
No.
So let's rank it. Jim, as our guest, out of 5 stars, how are you going to rank the Wolfman from 2010?
I'm going to give it a solid 2. 1 for Anthony Hopkins and 1 for Hugo Weaving.
Okay. Tucker, what about yourself?
You know what's better than this movie? Marmaduke's better than this movie. You know what's better than this movie? Madam Web.
Fuck that.
Madam Web is
Ooh.
better than this movie.
Hard disagree
Okay.
on all of that.
All right. Okay. You heard about this? You seen this? This is going to be, what's the lowest rating I can give, Steven?
I mean, Brett and I gave 0 stars to Food Fight, so
This gets 0.25 star for Hugo Weaving, like, making me want him in a Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman.
Fair.
0.25 star.
I'm giving it 3.
Get out of here.
That's
All
fucked
right.
up, and
Bye,
I don't get
everybody.
it, but, like, in fact, I'm a little offended, but I said I wasn't gonna take this too seriously. I'm gonna calm down, Steven. There it is. Just a little air. There we
Where's
go.
the mug? Bring out the mug.
Oh yes, I'm radiating
bring out the mug.
positivity. It's all good vibes. So many good vibes.
Oh, there it is. So yeah, that gives us an average
3
average
stars,
score
really?
of 1.75. Yeah, I'm giving it 3 stars, Tucker.
Can you explain those 3 stars briefly, just so I can get an idea of why? Because you didn't seem to really like it that much either.
I like the
3
performances.
stars?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it's mediocre, it's fine with moments of greatness. That's that extra star or extra half star.
I'm not judging you. I'm just trying to understand.
Go ahead.
Because here's the thing. This is also, as I think it was the Metacritic summary, or maybe the Rotten Tomatoes summary said, it is also a horror movie entirely devoid of scares.
Mm-hmm.
That is very bad.
But again, it's doing what the Universal monster movies were doing. It's just that those don't read scary now either.
Sure.
But you've got the big sets. You've got you've got really good performances, I think, from top to bottom, the entire cast. Even the characters that are not given much to do are still doing really good work. Particularly Hopkins, particularly Weaving. I defend Del Toro in this. I think he's doing good stuff here. You may disagree, and that's fine, but I continue to defend. I like the use of practical effects when the movie uses them. I particularly like that they did the makeup effects. Do I like how those are employed? Not necessarily, but I like that they're used. And I don't know. I appreciate the ambition of something like this. I wish we'd gotten the original Mark Romanek version. Yeah. Do I want to see what that one looks like more than this one? Yeah. Would I probably rate this movie like 4.5 stars if it existed? Absolutely. And again, this needs to be stated. I love werewolves.
You're a werewolf, dude.
At the end of the day, I like werewolves and wolfmen. Like those are my favorite movie monsters, even more than Gremlins. And y'all know how much I love Gremlins. I
Big
love
dog soldiers
werewolves.
guy here. Big dog soldiers guy.
It's why
also,
I'll. Sorry, Tucker. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, what I was saying was so very trivial. So please continue.
It's why for me the best VHS segment, and by VHS segment I mean segment in the VHS horror anthology series, will always be the Alien Slumber Party one, because I have such a fondness for aliens and UFO stuff that I get that. I disagree with you, Stephen, but I also understand where you're coming from.
And that's fine. We, as long as at the end of the day we all recognize that we're still friends.
We're all friends.
We're friends.
There we go. And then really, that's what's important. The real Wolfmen are the friends we made along the way.
I will judge you so harshly over your taste in a film, Stephen, but it will never affect how good of friends we are ever.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. You
will
have
talk
you
some
have
shit about you to your face about it, but that
you
doesn't
do it
mean we ain't
often.
friends.
I was gonna say you do it often. The group chat is just constantly like, I can't believe you thought, like, you know what? I had a better time with this movie than I did, and this is gonna hurt you, Tucker, but I have to say it. I had a better time with this movie than I did with The Lady Killers.
No, I mean, like, that hurts, yes, but also that tracks because I know how much you hate that movie. So
yeah,
the Coen one, right? Not the Ealing Studios Lady Killers. Okay,
correct. Yeah.
No, the good one, not the shitty original one. The Coen Brothers one, the good one.
I also want to mention, because I didn't do it earlier, early performance by young Asa Butterfield in this movie as Benicio del Toro's baby little brother. So yeah, the guy who would be Ender in Ender's Game, the guy who was that close to being Spider-Man, Asa Butterfield. Yeah. But there we go. That is our episode on 2010's The Wolfman. Jim, I know that the Cast of Cthulhu is on an indefinite hiatus at the moment. Is it dead and gone? Is it never coming back? Can we live in hope? What's the good word?
It's pretty much dead and gone, I would say. Not out of any design. It was really just kind of our schedules were kind of not syncing up, especially after the birth of my son, because I just had less time to watch more things. And so the last episode we put out was October 2023, in which I interviewed noted Lovecraft scholar St. Joshi. And there was kind of this idea that we'd kind of take a break for the rest of the year, and we just ended up never picking it back up, really. Maybe at some point, but it's kind of dead and buried. But if anyone is curious, it was a podcast called the Cast of Cthulhu, in which me and my co-host James McCormick would discuss movies that were adapted from or inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft, and that was anything from, the literal straight adaptations such as From Beyond or Reanimator, or the spiritual ones such as Annihilation or In the Mouth of Madness, that kind of stuff, and everything in between, with some interviews and some things in there. That was on Podbean, so by all means seek out Cast of Cthulhu. Otherwise, you can find me on Bluesky at Nolan Fixes Teeth. I am nowhere else, but really, if I leave nothing else of this world, I want a tagline for a Lon Chaney biopic to be, of all the roles he played, the greatest role was that of father. So if there are any studio executives listening,
there you go.
Yes.
Jim, why don't you throw your hat in to direct that? Seems like you've got a vision.
That's a good idea, but 3 weeks into it, I might get replaced by Joe Johnston. That's the only thing I'm worried about.
Yeah. He hasn't done anything in a while.
He's itching for a new project, I hear. Yeah, he's hungry.
He's ready. So statistically, now is a bad time. You should wait till he does something,
or wait till he's in the middle of something, because chances are very good he's not going to leave it. So
there you go.
According to IMDb, he's got a couple of upcoming projects. So I don't know. We'll see if
I'll
any of
bet.
those land.
Fair.
Yeah.
Jim, it is such a pleasure to have you back. It has been it's been over a year, and quite frankly, that is inexcusable. So we'll definitely try to have you back on sooner rather than later, because it's such a pleasure. And if we can get you and James together on a single episode, gosh, so much the better. I would love to have a Cast of Cthulhu reunion on this show.
And the thing was, because I was working during the day, and then I had a kid, and he was working nights, and that's where the schedule snafus always came in. He is now working a different job where he does occasionally work nights, but not like overnight shifts. So there is a possibility of that happening.
All right.
So I don't want to promise anything, but the odds are better now than they were this time last year, I would say.
And honestly, it's been a while since we've had James on too. Like we need to that's something we need to rectify as well, because I don't think we've had him on since I Am Legend. So we need to get him back on there too. So
sure.
Absolutely. Well, again, Jim, such a thrill. Anytime, anything else you want to, I know we'll have you back for a fire walk with me. Anything else that you may want to cover, let us know, and we'll throw you on the schedule for it and absolutely get that cooking. But this is the Disenfranchised Podcast. This is the show where we talk about those failed franchise starters, and you can find us on many forms of social media. Gosh, Bluesky, Instagram, Facebook, and what's the other one? YouTube. And Letterboxd at disenfranchpod. Find us at all those places. Shoot us an email, disenfranchpod@gmail.com, to hear your words read on the podcast. Also, leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. That goes a long way to helping us find more people like you. Hey, join the official conversation of the Disenfranchised Podcast at patreon.com/disenfranchpod. It costs no money to join the official conversation. You'll get main feed episodes dropped in the Patreon feed every week and get to talk directly to Tucker and I. We do often respond in those feeds. If you're going to find us there. You could also join for $5 a month and get access to a whole lot more content behind that paywall as well, including at the beginning of every month, we'll let you know exactly what we've got coming in the month, or at least as close to exact as we can get at the beginning of the month, scheduling issues notwithstanding. But hey, that's all great ways to support us and find us. You can find me, Stephen Foxworthy, your intrepid host, on Bluesky, Instagram, Letterboxd at Chewy Walrus. If Brett ever decides to emerge from the woods, you might be able to find him on Bluesky and Instagram and Letterboxd at sus_warlock, or just sus_warlock on Bluesky. Tucker, where can we find you these days?
Well, as you know, Stephen, I always like to take this opportunity when you hand it over to me for social media handles and such to kind of wrap up and say anything that I forgot to say during the podcast proper. And I'd like to mention, Jim, you brought up From Beyond and Reanimator when you were talking about Lovecraft. And I just think it's kind of rad that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, directed by this film's director, Joe Johnston, was written by Brian Usna and Stuart Gordon, who were responsible for both From Beyond and Reanimator.
Yep.
Correct, yeah.
Anyway, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Ice909. That's ICENINE, the number 0 and the number 9. Also on Instagrams, you can find me at Tuck Mugs. That's Tuck_Mugs. We had 3 posts in December. And not only have I not posted this mug yet, but I just realized I haven't posted my weird Lake Tahoe mug that makes my teeth feel weird.
No,
I was drinking out of that the other day, and I was like, hey, man, did I? I guess I didn't. I looked. So, I mean, I've got some stuff in my back pocket. I got to get with the social media manager. I'm hoping we can get 2 to 3 posts out this month on Tuck Mugs. Maybe a guest post from anybody, really. Like, just send your guest post, the photo and the description if you're familiar with the format. If you follow Tuck Mugs, you're familiar with the format. Send that to disenfranchpod@gmail.com or just DM Tuck Mugs If you're following Tuck Mugs, just DM us on Instagram. You can send a photo, you can send the text, and we'll pop it right on there. We'll get with our social media manager, and he'll throw that bitch on there, and it'll be fantastic. Tuck_mugs on Instagram.
Right
Yeah.
on. I do want to point out, Jim, I just found the At the Mountains of Madness table read. I am absolutely putting that in the show notes so that people can check that out, because that was good. Brett and I both on that episode, and it's a good time.
Oh,
That
nice.
was our most listened to episode. Yeah, that was I think Christmas of, if not 2020, then 2021, but it was definitely a peak
2021. Yeah. It features also Wild Lehman Kessler, like the guy who the mayor of Gambier, Ohio, who is super famous on TikTok. In that episode, which I was like, Brett followed him on TikTok at the time, and Brett was like seriously geeking out that entire table read, like texting me, I know this guy, this is so cool.
Because that was I think, because he was involved with, I got the idea from the Pod and the Pendulum did a table read of Cary Fukunaga's It script,
which is how you and I met and how we connected. Yeah.
And so that's where I got that idea from, and that was a really cool participation, and it was, you can hear us talk more about that between UI and the listeners. Like, didn't love Del Toro's script for it. I still would have preferred to see that over Prometheus, which was apparently the idea or the film that killed his idea of doing At the Mountains of Madness. But yeah, by all means, check that out. And let me also just say my one final thing, folks. I am now following Disenfranchised on Letterboxd, and they're legit. One of their 4 favorite movies is The Rocketeer. So I got to give it to you. Also, Tucker giving 3 stars to Madam Web. You are insane. So
sorry. Look,
there's that.
It's about perspective with that film. If you don't think about how much it costs, if you tell yourself
if you don't think about how bad it sucks,
if you say to yourself, this is a B movie, this costs like $15 million to make, then you're gonna
there's Jerry Seinfeld and Matthew Broderick as bees just flying around in the background.
I do have a coworker who gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd, and his review,
that's a lot.
His review was, if you don't like this movie, you're a misogynist. Now, I should say,
so a meme review. Then he was doing
he has the kind of like tone of voice and presentation where you can never tell if he's joking or serious. Never.
I know the type.
So that like sounds exhausting.
He'll come in the room, he'll say something, everyone will laugh, and then he'll leave without laughing, and it's like, was that a joke? I can't tell. So take basically anything he says with what's more than a grain of salt? An entire shaker of salt.
A salt lick is what I usually say. Just take it with a salt lick, because it's not going down otherwise.
Yes, correct.
One little salt packet.
Yeah. At any rate, this has been the Disenfranchised podcast for my co-host Tucker, the absent Brett Wright, and the great, as always, Jim Rohner. Until next time, I got to find my quote here again. I lost it. It is said there is no sin in killing a beast, only in killing a man. But where does one begin and the other end?
Ugh. Fucking Gene Simmons.